Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Jim K. Ford Sens Nation podcast. Steve Warren along with the coach, Greg Kennedy. Greg, how are things today?
I'm good, Steve. I want to apologize ahead of time just in case. We've seemed to have had some glitches with my microphone today. So if I'm suddenly silent, half our listeners will probably be thrilled by that. But it may happen that I suddenly drop off here. Let's hope we can get through this.
Oh, it'll be fine. This is a professional operation. There'll be no
Yes.
issues here. None
Okay.
that the listener will notice anyway. There'll be lots for the old editor here at the conclusion of the program. I'm sure there's lots there, but the listener does not care. What they care about is some good hockey talk, and let's launch in. You know what? Actually, I want to talk about something non-hockey right out of the gate. The Olympic Games have come to a close in Paris. I think you probably are glued to the TV set certainly more than me, and probably more sports fans out there. So what were your general overall thoughts about Canada and the Olympic Games?
Here I'm going to bring out a controversial statement right now, Steve. Agree or disagree? I firmly believe that there should be not one single event in the Olympics that does not involve a clock or a scoreboard. If I'm not timing you to see how fast you are, or I'm not keeping score of how many goals, buckets, whatever you get, you're out. I don't want anything that involves a judge. I understand that unfortunately that takes care of things like figure skating, gymnastics, break dancing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But here's the other one. The one that somebody mentioned to me today was, what about boxing? And I thought, boxing and judo and wrestling, and that kind of eliminates those things too. But then here was my comeback. If you play a hockey, could you imagine an NHL game ends in a tie? And at the end of the game, they say, okay, we're going to have to go to the judges' cards to determine who won this match, right? Which is what they do in boxing. I think that you can still have boxing. It just involves like knock the guy out, or figure out a way to electronically work the gloves. So if you hit the guy, an electronic point goes up. But anyway, what do you think of my possibly controversial take that anything that involves a judge is out of the Olympics?
Well, here's the downside, that even the games that have scoreboards, there's so much judging that goes on within the context of those games to put up scores on those scoreboards. So judging is always going to be a part of it. But yeah, breakdancing, that was
where did that come from?
Well, I mean, it's not even going to be in the next Olympics. So I'm going to try to figure out what it's like. They used to have demonstration sports. They're at a full-fledged sport, and then you're going away come 2028 in LA. So and then that Australian who just I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah,
just basically wriggling on the ground. That's what that was.
It was the Eddie Edwards of the 2024 Athens Games, for an old school reference there. Just somebody who said, well, I think I can represent our country in this. I'm going to go for this. And they were the best one in Australia, so they got to go. I think that's what happened.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something like that. But it's just, even with Eddie, it was like he looked like all the other ski jumpers. He just didn't go very far in his jumps. This literally looked like Greg Kennedy or Steve Warren trying to improvise breakdancing after never having done it before. It was just ridiculous. If I'm in the complaining mode, by the way, I'm watching the closing ceremonies and I'm like, what is Canada wearing again? Like the uniform. The sweats that they had on through the entire games was one thing, and then what they wore in the closing ceremonies, it looked like a safari outfit that Jack Black would wear in Jumanji, only someone has thrown a bunch of blood and guts all over his uniform. Like, I don't know what that was. That was like embarrassing.
Yeah. Lululemon went hog wild on the, it was Lululemon did all the outfits, right? Some of them,
I have no idea.
Yes, it was. Because I can remember seeing the Lululemon on stuff. Brooke Henderson looked good. I liked her outfit. She looked good in her clothes, like standard red pants, white shirt. That's Lululemon, mind you. But she looked a lot better. She didn't wear any of those silly tracksuit stuff that the other athletes had to wear. But I like the Olympics. I like watching Olympics generally, but I still find that a lot of people talk about, I love when the Olympics come up. I get to see some of these fringe things, or I get to watch some of the sports that I don't normally watch. Well, outside of swimming and track, I don't think there's really any of those other sports that I watch, or I don't even know that I had an opportunity. Like I heard some stuff about some guy in a steeplechase face planted in the water. I missed that. I would like to have seen that. I think I didn't see any of that. I loved playing Europe. You ever play European handball in high school, Steve? I loved playing that game. I didn't get to see
No.
any of that. I didn't see any archery. I didn't see any. I can't even think of them now, but some of those other sports that you don't normally see, I still only really watch the big ones. I really only watch the big stuff, and I had to watch the golf off of Gem. I had to sign up for a CBC Gem account in order to watch the golf.
Right. Yeah, I didn't like the way they handle athletics either. I guess this is pretty standard. I'm trying to watch Alicia Newman, and I talked about this on the show with Jimmy. She was in studio a couple of times over the years, and she's just great. She's impossible not to root for, and she's had all these injury troubles, and finally, wins a bronze medal. But I don't know. It felt like it was kind of on tape delay or something. It's like, okay, we'll watch half a dozen jumps, and then now we'll go over here and cover all these other things at the same time. I would like to have been invested just in the women's pole vault to watch Alicia Newman and her journey to that bronze medal. And the one last thing is that Tom Cruise thing was, I thought, really cool and a neat way to go from Paris to LA. I thought it was neat.
Yep.
But why CBC decided through the whole recorded part of Tom Cruise's thing when he's flying across the ocean and getting back to LA, and it's like Scott Russell through the whole thing is going, Tom Cruise really is a Top Gun. Ha ha ha. Like, what are you doing? And we all know what's going on here. It doesn't need any dialogue. Anyway.
And it was a Mission Impossible reference, right? It was more like he was playing Ethan Hunt than he was playing Maverick. I thought that was cool. That's a good point. I like the way, and they went to the Hollywood sign. That was cool. I think I probably like the closing ceremonies more than I like the opening ceremonies. Some of that French artistic stuff was a little too much for my liking. Thank you, but I like the closing ceremonies. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, except for the uniforms. It was very cool. But we should jump in. My goodness,
Sure.
7 minutes into the program, we have not talked any hockey yet, and there was big news today on Monday on the Coming In Hot podcast. It was Michael Andlauer making a rare appearance. I think probably his first podcast appearance since he took over as Ottawa Senators owner, and maybe that's a harbinger of what's to come for new media and the availability and the access that places like podcasts have. And fingers crossed that that'll be the case. But Andlauer had some interesting things to say. I think the big one that probably grabbed people most was the little nugget that he kind of just volunteered about the talks for the arena deal with the NCC. I'm paraphrasing here, Greg, but he said something along the lines of that either former ownership or the league exaggerated a little bit how close they were actually to an arena deal with the NCC so that they could maybe drive up the price, which I thought, for what it was kind of a throwaway sentence as he went on to talk about other things. I thought that was a pretty scathing thing to say. Not saying he's wrong, but it's fairly inflammatory. It's the kind of thing you sue people over. So he's obviously not. He's got a bit of a bee in his bonnet, I think Michael Andlauer does, with the league between that and the Dadonov case where he loses a first rounder for a deal that went down maybe even before he even thought about buying the Ottawa Senators.
Right. It makes you think, right? We're pretty much convinced that the NHL was already investigating on the Dadonov situation before the team was sold. So yes, why couldn't you tell the prospective owners that this is a possibility? But as for the land deal and building of the arena, the one group said, look, we're the leader right now. We'd like 2 weeks of nobody else is allowed to do anything. We're going to go talk to the NCC and try to negotiate something to work something out to inform us better to make our offer. And they were flatly denied, right? Like, no, that's not the way it works. But in retrospect, with 2020 hindsight, maybe that wouldn't have been a bad idea. Have every group's in a online conference call or something, and have the NCC come on and talk to you, the group of people that were interested in buying the team, and saying, look, here's the situation, here's where we're at, here's what we're looking for, here's the current offer from the Sens, yada yada, just to help these guys do their due diligence when it comes to purchasing the team. And I think I don't know that that's necessarily the NHL's fault, because who knows how involved the NHL were in the discussions between the Senators and the NCC to begin with. We really don't know that either, do we?
Right. I had a chance in the process of the sale to talk to one of the owners, long phone conversation, and they bailed from the thing, and I could hear the eye. I don't want to say who it is, but I could hear the eye rolling about the process over the phone.
Mhm.
Eye rolling shouldn't have a sound, Greg, but I could still hear it over the phone. Eye rolling about how crazy the whole sales process was. This fella saying, I was under the impression I was the highest bidder. And all of a sudden, once I made my official bid, then they come right back at me the next day and say, oh, so and so has beaten you. And he's like, what? And so, yeah, the process, I think, I don't want to call it sketchy because I was not privy to it. And all this is hearsay and all this is secondhand information. But between that conversation and to hear how Michael Andlauer it keeps throwing out these little nuggets and doesn't seem like a very happy guy, I don't think it was, the best of processes, and we'll leave it that.
Yeah. Well, I guess
And
the
I think
question
with
is
Andlauer,
what's fair and what's fair, what's allowed. If you're trying to
right,
sell your car, what there's certain things that you have to disclose and certain things that you don't have to. You're trying to sell your hockey team. I don't know what are the parameters. What do you have to disclose? What don't you have to disclose? I think
right.
that's probably something that needs to be settled, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a real estate deal. Like real estate has rules. If you put your house up for sale, somebody puts a bid on it, and then someone else puts a bid. It's not like a back and forth thing. Everybody just puts in their best bid, and you grab it, or you walk away. You can't just sit there, bouncing
Right.
offers back and forth. And so I don't know if rules exist like that for NHL teams or not. But obviously, Michael Andlauer is not real pleased with a couple of the elements of this situation. And obviously, he wants to be best in class. And one of the things he said a couple of times in the interview today is that he really makes it a priority to give the employees all the tools that they need so that he can hold them accountable. Because obviously, it's not really fair to hold somebody truly accountable. And this is why anytime anybody talks about Pierre Dorion, I say to myself, yeah, but he really had a guy over his shoulder constantly. He wasn't getting the investment necessarily that he needed. Walk a mile in the guy's shoes before you fully bury the guy about the performance that he had. Obviously, there were things that were left to be desired, but he did not receive the tools, the A1 tools that Michael Andlauer is now providing Steve Staios and his employees. And really, let's be honest, Eugene Melnyk for 20 years, maybe not all 20 years, but at least the last 10, he ran things on a shoestring budget and held his people accountable anyway.
Right. And that even hitting even closer to home, think about all the coaches that were here. Like how many times did we have the conversation, you and I, right here on this podcast? Okay, how much of it is DJ Smith and how much of it is a lack of talent? How much of it is
Right.
poor personnel? How much of it is a general manager who, for whatever reason, isn't able to or cannot find good enough players to help the coach, right? It's the same thing with ownership. With management over the years, right? As you alluded to. Here's poor Pierre Dorion. Who knows how handcuffed he was? So it's nice to hear Michael Andlauer today telling people, saying flat out, I want to give my guys everything they need. And he talked about making they get the best players he can find to put the best team on the ice, staffing situations, facility situations, all those kinds of things that it makes it so much easier to fire somebody, Steve, if you've given them everything they need to be successful, especially if you're giving them things they ask for. Hey, I could use this, I need that, I need this, and you supply it all, and then they still don't meet expectations. It makes it so much easier, and your conscience is so much clearer if you fire somebody for a lack of performance or a lack of success after that.
Yeah, I think a good example of that when we talk about players, Pierre Dorion's not he's a good hockey man. Like, compared to 95% of the people listening, he's more qualified to be a GM of an NHL team than that group. So the thing about it is, he knew that this team needed to be surrounded and insulated with more veterans. However, he was not able to financially to go out and get those veterans. He was going out and getting, Derek Stepan and Braden Coburn, like guys who were at the end, because that was all that I'm sure that his boss was willing to offer up for him. Lost my earpiece here, Greg. I'm just going to put
You're
it
all
right
good.
back in there.
You know?
There we go. So that's a great example, I think, if I do say so myself, of tools not being given to one of his employees, because Dorion was well aware that that was something that that this club needed, these young players needed. So where Steve Staios is actually getting the players, getting higher quality veterans, this was not something that Pierre Dorion had not thought of.
Correct. But it remains to be seen if Steve Staios has been successful or not. Right. Let's
True.
give these guys, half a season and see how a Nick Jensen looks, see how a Michael Amadio looks, see how a David Perron looks. There's we talked about it many times. The placeholders were never good enough. Now, were they not good enough because somebody in the scouting department said this player was better than he turned out to be? Or were they not good enough because that's all that the Senators could afford? That's all that, that Pierre Dorion was allowed to spend? We don't even know that part of it. We don't know the exact reason why Pierre Dorion gave up a second rounder to get Derek Stepan. We don't know why he gave up whatever it was to get Cedric Paquette. Came with somebody else from Tampa at the same time, right? Like, what was the reasoning behind, or what was the logic in acquiring some of those failures that he acquired? And if it was, well, the pro scout said this guy was damn good, well then, okay, that pro scout's gone and we moved on from that. But if the reason was financial, then we're back to the same thing again. Can you really fault Pierre Dorion for the players he brought in? In the case of Steve Staios, he's got the money. He has staff now. He's making decisions with a lot of help around him and with a little bit bigger, easier to handle checkbook. So hopefully these things work out for him, but it remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, who was the guy from Tampa you just mentioned a second ago?
Paquette.
So I think when Paquette arrived, I want to say he was solo when he arrived, but he left, I think, with Galchenyuk in a deal that would bring Ryan Dzingel back for round 2 with the Senators.
How exciting. Yeah, that was a great move.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was game changer. Game changer. I am so done with old school Christmas lights. The tangling, the burning out, the minus 30-degree installation dangling from a ladder. Goodbye Christmas lights. Hello Celebrite, your permanent holiday lighting solution. I've got them on my home right now. When it's daylight, they're absolutely invisible. But at nighttime, things come to life. Right now, with the beautiful weather, we're looking forward to Canada Day. And of course, the classic colors of Christmas. You can really make the lights dance, all controlled from your smartphone. And on those nights when there is no occasion or holiday, you can roll with just a beautiful, subtle white light. And the installation team from Celebrite Ottawa was fantastic. So you can keep on rolling with old school Christmas lights, or you can contact them today at celebrite.ca. Yay! Moving on. Here's my theory. No one in the NHL is going to report to training camp next month in a more improved headspace than Shane Pinto. Agree or disagree?
I think, I don't know that the answer is no one, but yes, at least on the Ottawa Senators, nobody should be coming in there with a clean slate and feeling real good and saying, yep, this is it. Nothing bugging me now. No contract issue, no gambling issue, no suspension to deal with. I just get to play hockey, and I'm really looking forward to it. Shane Pinto's on a list of about 5 or 6 guys who I'm looking at to have serious, I don't want to use the word breakout. I don't want to say comeback, but I want to say improvement, a serious improvement over last year. Shane Pinto's one of those guys for sure. Top of the list, probably.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that there's not, someone else will be in a great headspace. I'm just saying no one will be in a more improved headspace than Shane Pinto. And then you factor in, and you're right about all the individual things that happened here. The team thing, he was part of that too. Like the GM change, the coaching change, all the distractions that happened for this team. It must be a weird thing to just, you're used to this one coach, and then mid-season you've got this entirely different coach. I can't picture 2 different coaches than DJ Smith and Jacques Martin. So you had to deal with all the team distractions in there as well. But on top of that, I think that he comes in just lighter, gambling, suspension. I mean, he comes back. He hasn't played a game since the previous April. From April of 2023 to whenever he got in there, January 21st of 2024. That's a long time off, no matter how old you are. And good for him. He came up and had a pretty damn good season. And I think if the only thing that one thing that might work against him, some might say, would be Josh Norris being fully healthy and maybe taking away some of his opportunities for the coming year. But I looked it up. If you even look at the 1 month before Josh Norris got hurt and Shane Pinto was back in the lineup, Pinto outdueled Josh Norris, both in ice time and in point production. So he may have already, on his own, regardless, before we even talk about injuries, he may have already passed this guy on the depth chart.
Yeah, and I can see, I think Shane Pinto's going to be more a Travis Green type player than Josh Norris. I think Shane, guys like Pinto, Ridley Gregg, Brady Tkachuk for sure, Zach Ostapchuk. I think there are certain guys that are going to be the kind of players that may just take off under Travis Green and his coaching style and the type of game that he expects you to play, the condition that he expects you to be in. I think those guys have a leg up on a Josh Norris when it comes to being the coach's type of player.
Now that you brought up Travis Green, I think people have looked at his coaching record in Vancouver and suggested, what's all the fuss about? You know, why lock yourself in? When you had a guy, let's say a Dean Evason in Minnesota, who was, I think the last guy in the NHL to be hired by the Columbus Blue Jackets. Everybody's got their head coach for the coming season, but Evason went last. And that was a guy that for dismal playoff record for sure. But he was a 600 winning percentage, like 3-4 years in a row in Minnesota. Then you compare that to Travis Green in Vancouver. I know they're different teams, and obviously a lot of what you are as a coach is the chess pieces you're given. But what do you think truly impressed the Ottawa Senators, particularly Steve Staios, about Travis Green?
I think the first thing that would have impressed Steve Staios would have been Travis Green talking about training camp, talking about the physical fitness level, the expectation on these players. I think Travis Green would come across as a guy who would be not a hard taskmaster, but more demanding than what was here previous. I think that would have impressed Steve Staios. And also, of course, let's not forget the analytics staff of the Senators did their homework, got out their protractors and their calculators and whatever, and concluded that Travis Green is a pretty damn good coach based on whatever factors they used. I don't know, but they decided that the record was not exactly a reflection of Travis Green. I would assume that had something to do with the quality of the goaltending he had or the quality of the team he had versus the quality of opposition he's coaching against, whatever. They determined that team over exceeded or more than exceeded the numbers that they should have accomplished under him, and which, when you look at it, when they weren't all that great, but still it was impressive enough. I assume that team was probably deemed by the analytics community to be worse or far worse than what he got out of them. So I think that would have impressed Steve Staios for sure.
It's interesting. The team didn't really improve that much going from DJ Smith to Jacques Martin, the winningest coach in team history. And I think both those guys would probably say, well, watch the turnaround, give me Linus Ullmark, DJ Smith would say, or Jacques Martin would say. I think that Travis Green is set up for success now with the rebalancing of the roster, with the addition of Linus Ullmark. So, it'll be one of those deals where, was it the coaching or was it, the changeover in manpower on the ice? So we may never know, but either way, who cares how they get there, so long as they get there. Couple other things before we go today. No, sorry, follow up.
Well, I was going to say it ties back into Michael Andlauer today talking about trying to give every member of his staff, of his hockey staff, all the tools required to be successful, to make it easier to judge them. And you've just basically outlined what kind of things Travis Green has been given to make it easier for Steve Stais to judge him, right? All those new things, the new shiny toy, a goaltender, my God, a real live NHL caliber goaltender. These things make it easier for somebody to judge a coach when they've been added to the roster.
All right, to finish it out, the Ottawa Senators' main rival is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they're about to make news. We're recording this here on August 12th, and it sounds like they're going to strip John Tavares of his captaincy on Tuesday, which I find interesting. TSN's Darren Dreger reporting this. And remember the old days when we used to say a guy got stripped of his captaincy? Trevor Linden, when Mark Messier arrived in town, stripped of his captaincy. We really reached a point where we can't say that phrase anymore. Listen to how Dreger, with all due respect, I really respect the hell out of Darren Dreger, but it's okay to say that John Tavares is about to be stripped of his captaincy. The world will continue to spin on its axis. This is how it was phrased. Expect the Toronto Maple Leafs to name Auston Matthews captain on Wednesday. This is part of the evolution of Matthews as a leader, and current Maple Leafs captain John Tavares fully supports the change. Tavares has been heavily involved in the process with GM Brad Treliving. Like, my BS meter is going off so hard there. Well, have you ever known a captain that would be all in on gracious and happy about turning over the captaincy to a teammate?
I haven't. Well, I mean, you raised the big one. Yeah, you raised the big one in Trevor Linden, of course. That's the worst. But the guy in Chicago that gave it up, I don't know who it would have been, that gave it up to Jonathan Taves, probably wasn't all that big a deal. The guy in Edmonton that gave it up to Wayne Gretzky probably wasn't that big a deal. I think there comes a time in certain players' careers where it's okay. He's now captain material. I mean, even whoever it was on the island who was captain before John Tavares. There's always somebody. It's not necessarily that the guy was traded away. There's a lot of times it's just, okay, you had your day, you've run your course, and it's, we're moving on to this guy. I think this one seems much more like that type of scenario than a Mike Keenan's in town. I brought Mark Messier with me. I hate Trevor Linden. Moose is now the captain. I think they're slightly different situations, I think, anyway.
Is there somebody that from the past that you think was happy about giving up their captaincy? Well, or you think there was somebody, you think there's a time where stripped of your captaincy is a bad thing to say as part two of that question?
Well, yeah, because I don't see this as a stripping. I see this as how did he word it? A natural progression. I think that sounds about right. It's time. It's time to give it up. And whether he's happy about it or not, he might not be thrilled about it. But by the same
token, my point.
Yeah, but by the same token, it's not quite Trevor Linden here, right? Again, I'm going to go old school, old folks. Sorry, 60-year-old man here. Like Clark Gillies gave up the C to Denny Potvin, and there was no real problem there. It was just he wasn't stripped. He just said, "Look, Denny Potvin's the main man here now. He's going to be the captain." I just. I don't know. I want to say something along the lines of, "Does it really matter?" It sounds like a cliche. Well, it is a cliche, but you don't need a letter on your jersey to be a leader. I think it's a big
I just
deal.
think I just think you're never. I don't think anybody. This is my belief.
Yeah,
Clark Gillies included. I don't think anybody volunteers to give up the captaincy. I think you're voluntold.
Okay, all right.
That's how I feel.
Well,
and you got to be. You have Tavares has so much money left in his contract. What else is he going to say and do? He's obviously going to present a gracious front, but I just don't believe that anybody who holds a captaincy in the NHL who stays with his team, whatever they say, whatever public face they put on it, I think they never are truly happy about it. I could be wrong, but that's how I feel.
Well, we need to find some people to talk to. We need to. Who was the captain before Gretzky? Who was the captain in Winnipeg before Dale Hawerchuk?
I think it was Lee Fogelin.
I wanted to say Lee Fogelin myself too. And in Winnipeg, I don't know, was like Dave Babich the captain at some point? Like that was a definite, okay, look, the kid's good enough now. He's our leader. He gets the C. There are certain scenarios. Now, this would have made more sense. I guess my argument would have made more sense if it was given to Matthews a few years ago. But now that it's happening now, it seems more like a stripping than a. If you were going to do the natural progression argument, you would have given it to Matthews 2 or 3 years ago. It wouldn't have taken till now. So I guess that kind of lends more credence to your thought that it is a part. I'm going to go half and half. It's a partial stripping, Steve.
A partial stripping. All right,
Yeah,
fair enough.
right.
Couple other things as we head out the door here. 6 Ottawa Senators have made the top 200 ranking in fantasy hockey at NHL.com. And I'm a little, I mean, how does Jake Sanderson not slide into your top 6 if you're analyzing the Ottawa Senators?
Yeah.
And exactly, how does a kid in Chicago, who was just drafted, ladies and gentlemen, he was drafted early, obviously, 2nd overall in this year's draft, but somehow, some way, Lev Shunov is in the top 200 and Jake Sanderson is not? What? I know these things are always subjective, but sometimes they're dumber.
Is this one of these fancy draft type? Is this for people who the players cost you something? Like, is there a certain value attached to these guys? And this list is, who's got better value for you to pick? Or is this just straight out, these are the top 200 players?
Well, it depends on your fantasy league. You can do it in any different number of ways. You can just
but this list is the top 200 players. This is the best player in the league. Period. Who's number 1?
Well, it's Connor McDavid.
Okay, so that makes sense. So
it's based on standard fantasy. You've got goals, assists, plus minus, power play points, shots on goal, hits, stuff like that. Thomas Chabot is at 40.
Well, how is Thomas Chabot ahead of Jake Sanderson?
I don't know. Nobody in Ottawa knows exactly.
Whose list is this? Let's get this guy on here.
It's NHL.com, so we have to give it some credence. And it is the dog days of summer, so it gives us something to debate.
Okay.
But when you look at it, the rest of the list, we've got your top 10. We'll do that. I don't want to ring off top 200. But your top 10 in order: McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov, Matthews, Pasternak, Draisaitl, Panarin, Rantanen, and ring-a-ding-ding, Brady Tkachuk at 9, ahead of Sidney Crosby, who was 10th. So some real accolades for the kid, Greg.
That's very nice. That's good. That's really good.
Fine company.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you've got your Senators who made the list beyond that. As I mentioned, Chabot is at 192, Batherson at 145, Ullmark at 132, Giroux at 108, and Tim Stützle at 63. I have a problem with Stützle at 63 behind the likes of Wyatt Johnson. Johnson is going to be awesome, but he just had, he had his first breakout year with 65 points. Stützle had an off year, and he still outscored Johnson last season. And by the way, he's not 30 years old. He's like a couple of years older than Johnson. So simmer down on that. Stützle is a lot better than 63.
Agree totally. I'm looking forward to, like I mentioned way earlier in this show, talking about bounce backs and players who are going to outperform themselves from last year. I see Stützle as being one on that list for sure. Giroux had a bit of a down year from the year before. I see him being better. I see Pinto being better. I see Chabot being better. I definitely see Stützle being better.
All right. That will do it for today's show. Any final thoughts before we go, Greg?
If it's got a judge, it's out of the Olympics. I'm sticking with my argument.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And remember the episode of Seinfeld? Yeah, no breakdancing. That's got to go too. But remember the episode of Seinfeld where they got a hold of George's dad's clothing?
Yes.
And they're all full of moths and stuff, and they had to burn it and stuff. I would like to do something similar with the Canadian closing ceremonies uniforms. They need to be a big bonfire, and buy them some cool clothes. All the athletes can show up and throw their gear into the fire, and buy them something cool. Get them $1,000 a piece at Lululemon, and go in and buy something cool to wear to the big uniform bonfire. The Olympic bonfire.
Wear a Roy Hobbs New York Knights jersey.
Love that.
Isn't that nice? I like
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love Roy Hobbs.
Well, I'm trying to figure, what was the name of his bat?
Wonder Boy.
Wonder Boy.
Or was that his was Wonder Boy, and then he had to use the Savoy Special after Wonder Boy broke.
That is elite movie trivia right there. I'm pretty good at trivia. I wouldn't have got that.
There you go.
All right. Let us take our leave. Enjoy your week, everybody. Don't forget, we invite you to check out the hockey news, thn.com/Ottawa. And also don't forget that our website for this show, sensnationhockey.com. Greg, enjoy your week. And we'll probably talk in the next few days. We're going to have Drake Batherson on in our next episode, our midsummer checkup with the Drake. So make sure you check that out. And I should also do the standard things. We're here on YouTube now. So if you've enjoyed the show, if you're getting a kick out of it, then it'd be awesome if you could subscribe. And that way you'll know immediately when new episodes have been published. And maybe do the same thing as wherever you listen to your podcast. So again, enjoy your day, and we shall talk to you in our next episode. Thanks, Greg.
See you, buddy.